Welcome to Ideagen TV. Today, I am thrilled to have with us Ilana Ron Levey, Managing Director for Public Sector at Gallup. Ilana, welcome.
Thank you so much, George. Really happy to be here.
It's so great to have you here because we at Ideagen are such big fans of Gallup and all of the work you're doing. We've worked with you all for so many years now, and it's just an honor and a privilege always to hear you've got data points, you've got insights, you've got information from a 360 perspective that so many folks just can't imagine. I mean, it's amazing to see, and you've been the trusted source of that data and information for so many years. And so the world appreciates that, literally and figuratively. And so Gallup's measuring public opinion in conflict-filled countries. Start with that.
Yes.
Ukraine, right?
Afghanistan. Well, first of all, we value our partnership so much with Ideagen.
Thank you.
And so thank you again for the opportunity. Since 2005, Gallup has been conducting the world's largest global survey on really the most important issues related to human development. And let me tell you a little bit about those origins, because I think it's really interesting. During the time of the Iraq War in the early 2000s and the invasion of Afghanistan, Donald Rumsfeld, as you probably know, was being criticized by some sources about, well, is this really what the Afghan people want? And he said, well, it's not as if we can do a Gallup poll in the hills of Afghanistan and understand what the people really want. And we heard that, and we took that as a challenge, and we took that as an opportunity. And we doubled down on our mission to really understand what the will of the people really is and try to disseminate that to leaders so that leaders can make better decisions reflecting public opinion. So in 2005, we launched the World Poll, which is an annual survey of nationally representative probability-based samples in 140 countries, including Afghanistan, Ukraine, Ethiopia, countries over the last 16 years who have really struggled with conflict. And it's been a profound opportunity and a profound challenge. We have a standard methodology that we use in every country and a core set of questions that we look to repeat each year, things about life evaluation that I know we'll get into, well-being, trust in government, confidence in the security of a society, and then some rotating questions. But when we're looking at a conflict zone, we really have some immense logistical challenges, starting with the approvals to collect data. We've been kicked out of countries before. We don't want to be kicked out because we want to be able to provide these insights. Of those 140 countries, approximately 100 of those countries, we still collect data face-to-face. And because this is probability-based and representative, we're doing it in every corner of these countries, not just going to sort of the easier areas to access, because we really want a representative sample. So we have concerns about keeping our interviewers safe. We have issues related to passing roads where there might be roadblocks and checkpoints. We've had natural disasters to contend with. So really immense logistics that go into this with the goal of protecting our interviewers and protecting, of course, the households that we interview. We take that really, really seriously.
That's so profound to think about the World Poll having come out of, almost like developed from a statement that turned into a challenge.
Yes.
And that's leadership right there. You were able to, with your leadership and all the folks on the team at Gallup, to take, just a statement that was made and turn it into such a profound, level-setting World Poll.
Yeah.
And how is that going? I mean, is it?
I mean, we're so proud of it, and we think it's one of our greatest gifts to humanity. We know that academics use it. We know that political leaders. We have partner organizations that create custom modules through our World Poll on some of the most important topics: human slavery, financial inclusion, global risk, you name it. some of our World Poll data actually generates the data inputs into 3 Sustainable Development Goals for the United Nations, which we're very proud of, and working to see that number grow as well. So yeah, we're immensely proud, and now to be in year 16, and when we look at some of these insights, to actually now be able to see this quite lengthy trend line and the change, and there can be profound change when you look at a country like Ukraine and Afghanistan, in the midst of just tremendous turmoil. You can see profound change in a year or 2.
That's incredible. And it must be just inspiring and also disturbing on some levels, and all of the above. So it's a mixture of certainly of emotions. And I'd like to ask you a little bit about examples. So like public support of Ukraine during this time.
Great question. And this is something that we're continually measuring in the United States. We have our World Poll, and then since 1936 we've been measuring what Americans think about all kinds of topics, and foreign policy, as you can imagine, is a big topic. So what we see right now is about 66% of Americans do support continued military support for Ukraine's goal of remaining territorially independent. That's a high level for the American population of support for military assistance and equipment and continued financial assistance. Not surprisingly, there's partisan elements. When you look at just Republicans, over half of Republicans do feel that the level of assistance that we're providing right now is too high. But overall, 66% of the American population does support continued assistance to Ukraine, and really doesn't set a timeline. It says we want that support until the end, until Ukraine is able to establish independence.
Incredible. And it's incredible to have those insights, because then you're helping, we're here in Washington, we're helping to inform and affect decision-making with that types of insight and data.
And that's our goal. And it's a complex, question about, should leaders lead solely through the lens of public opinion? And our view is public opinion is a critical input, but sometimes political leaders have to take stands on unpopular issues because it's morally right or it's in our national interest, but it may not be popular. So we really like to look at both elements. We're not saying that the only input that matters is what public opinion says, but at the same time, so many decisions are made and ignore, popular and public sentiment.
You have to take that into account, is what you're saying.
Absolutely.
And that's the position that Gallup has. And so how about the Ukrainians themselves? You're able to then conduct these polls in every country, right?
Exactly.
How do they view this?
Yeah, great question. So we conducted the World Poll for Ukraine in September 2022. Our global surveys for the World Poll are annual, so it's quite fresh data. We had a lot of the logistical challenges, as you can imagine. We had to switch from a face-to-face interviewing framework to over the phone, because Ukrainian mobile operators were still able to operate even, as bombs were raining down and so much violence, as you can imagine. So we've really seen something remarkable. 84% of Ukrainians approve of President Zelensky's leadership. In 2021, only 41% approved of his leadership. So you just see that ability in times of crisis. Many countries, even partisan and divided countries, emerge much more united, much more determined. We've clearly seen that in the United States as well, under September 11th and many other times in our history. And then approval of national institutions in Ukraine is also at record high, where 94% of Ukrainians have confidence in their military, which is quite remarkable.
Incredible.
So even though Ukrainians, of course, are saying, the economy is getting worse, job prospects are getting worse, in most countries that can be associated with a reduction of approval in leadership. What we're seeing in Ukraine, though, is even with the economic issues and obviously life getting much, much harder, just remarkable unity and rallying around both the presidency and the military.
That's incredible.
Yeah, pretty remarkable.
And it's incredible that Gallup is helping to lead these insights.
Yeah.
Developing these insights for, use in any aspect, so that the folks around the world can better understand what the Ukrainian people are thinking.
Yeah, it's a critical lens, right? So often people speak on behalf of other countries,
Right.
but to really understand what citizens and residents of those countries themselves feel and how quickly public opinion and approval of leadership can change, it's really important.
It's striking how impactful that is. And what about Afghanistan? I know you mentioned Afghanistan. What is life like right now for the Afghan people?
Well, yes, we're very proud of our polling history in Afghanistan. Gallup has been the only organization able to collect nationally representative data under the Taliban, both rounds. So we have a pretty unique lens. We are seeing dismal views from the Afghan people, and it's not as surprising. So 62% of Afghans are dissatisfied with their freedoms. This is men and women. So, there's been just curtailing of all kinds of freedom of expression, freedom of mobility, autonomy in your lives. 90% of Afghans say that it's difficult or very difficult to get by on their household income. And 86% say they can't afford, in the last 12 months, they've had difficulty affording food for their households. That's the highest level, except for once in the Central African Republic in the last 16 years, about food insecurity in all countries that we've ever surveyed through the World Poll. So what we're really seeing is, we know, just a breakdown in the ability to provide for families, a breakdown in economic opportunity, a breakdown in job prospects. Everyone knows that, but these numbers are just so staggering. Close to 1 in 9 Afghans having difficulty providing food, and over 90% concerns about just getting by on their household income.
And so there's a direct correlation when you're looking at this data, I imagine, when global leaders are looking at what's happening in Afghanistan. Certainly we have intelligence agencies, et cetera, that can help decipher that. But I'm sure you also, with this information, help inform and affect their decision making as well.
Absolutely, yeah, because I think many people wonder, do the Afghan people, embrace the Taliban? Are they supportive of the direction of the country? Do they feel like more opportunities are unlocked for their population? And I think we're seeing a very different picture.
Sure. And that's profound. And it really is startling on so many levels when you think about the reach of Gallup. I think I want to underscore for a moment the reach that Gallup, and we've known you all, we've worked with you, obviously we understand, but for the millions of people that are watching this interview, the understanding of how far into what depth you're reaching individuals in these countries all across the world, including Afghanistan, like you mentioned, Ukraine. That's the story here. The story is, that and that's creating stories, because then people understand what's happening.
Absolutely. It's, anyone can collect data in Western Europe, in the United States, and there's tons of different surveys of different quality, of different modes. That's really important too, to have these consistent global metrics. But I think it takes really strong commitment and determination to be able to consistently provide representative data really in every corner, every province within a country like Afghanistan.
And I'm still really in awe of how the World Poll came together.
Yeah.
16 years now. Based on Secretary Rumsfeld's statement that, we can't interview people, of course.
And we have been doing global surveys before. We did, a lot of surveying, for instance, in Iraq itself during the American operations. But this idea of a consistent global metric, and also really focusing not just on the traditional economic measures, which are so important, But some of the subjective measures around well-being
Mhm.
and life evaluation, which we know are so predictive of the health of the society,
Right.
we felt like there wasn't a strong, consistent global data source focusing on those topics, which are just so germane to human development.
And that was my next question: is emotion? Why is Gallup measuring the emotional health
Mm-hmm.
of countries around the world?
Yeah, I mean, we think it's crucial for leaders to understand. So there's been quite a few instances in modern history when you look at just GDP, maybe in the UK around the time of Brexit, maybe in Egypt during the era of the Arab Spring, where traditional economic measures seem to suggest that society is improving, people are largely happy with the direction of the country. And then something happens, a political shock, and commentators say how surprised they are. No one could have predicted this. One of the things, though, that we've seen in our surveying is the metric of life evaluation is a highly, highly predictive metric of the stability and the health of a society, and one that we think leaders really need to pay attention to. One of the ways that we measure this is through something called the Cantrell scale. And it asks people to imagine their life today as a rung on a ladder with 10 steps from 0 to 10. And where do you place your life today on that ladder? And then we ask, where do you see your life in 5 years? And that metric of, do you place your life on a higher rung than it is today, is a very powerful metric of hope for the future and optimism. And we know that countries and societies with optimism and with hope for the future, even if today's living conditions are low, really have some differences than those that believe that their life will be worse 5 years from now. So it's pretty powerful. And then based on these responses, we categorize people into different dimensions of well-being. At the top is thriving with the higher scores, and at the bottom is suffering with the lowest scores. Something that's really interesting about Afghanistan, very, very sad, 98% of Afghans in 2022 are categorized in the suffering element of life evaluation. And even more sad is that there's less hope for the future, that things will be better in 5 years. And that's not what you want to see. You see that quite a few people rate their lives in Afghanistan today at 1.3, under 4, which is really, really low, but rated even worse at just 1 for 5 years later. So it's another sign that people are not happy with the direction of the country, and they have close to no hope that things will be any better in 5 years.
That's just very sad.
Yeah, very sad.
Very sad, and hopeful because Gallup is measuring this sentiment that folks that are paying attention to these issues will help to shine a light on that, because when you see human despair and lack of hope,
Right.
It's all you have is hope oftentimes.
Exactly.
And so thank you and Gallup for highlighting that, because that's
Of course.
I think at places like the UN and here in Washington, in the White House and on Capitol Hill, hearing this from Gallup when they're making these decisions on how to deal with these countries, that will come into play.
Yeah,
and that's our hope.
Yes,
Right.
ours too.
And so, staying on Afghanistan for a moment, because it seems like you've done so much there. I'd like to focus on Afghan women and what is it looking like for them?
Well, there's been, a ton of media coverage, I think, justifiable about a kind of a whole wave of reforms of increasing intensity of shutting women out of public lives from, being able to be outside, to jobs, to education. We know about that. But I think what people don't realize quite as much is that only 12% of women in Afghanistan say in 2022 that they are treated with respect. And there's been a 22 percentage point drop since the Taliban took over. So often the Taliban justifies its reforms by saying this is necessary to protect women. This is necessary to make them safer in society. But only 12% of women in Afghanistan today feel that they're treated with respect. I think a lot of the media coverage and rhetoric has, pointed to this divide between urban, educated women and rural women. But what we're really seeing is unification, that these reforms are harming their lives and curtailing the respect that they're being given, which is, I think, very, very sad. We're also seeing a growing number of men in Afghanistan also believe that women are not treated with respect. Pre-Taliban, you saw quite a distinction between men and women, where men were much more likely to believe that women were treated with respect than women. And now you're seeing, although I think more intensified for women, but both men and women believing that women are not treated with respect.
And so, Ilana, as you're looking at events relating to understanding current events and foreign policy within the lens of public opinion, how do you see that shaping the entirety of the decision-making process?
It's such an interesting question because public opinion is not always rational. And I want to give an interesting example from our archives. We're proud. We have a partnership with the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. And right now, if you go to one of the new permanent exhibits about Americans and the Holocaust, and Ken Burns' documentary, which has been very popular on PBS, kind of shows this data points as well. Gallup polled during the entire time of the World War II and looked at how Americans felt about the restrictions and obviously the persecution that Hitler was placing on the Jewish population of Germany. We started polling on that topic in 1938, right when the Nuremberg laws were enacted. And one of the things that you saw was that Americans were highly, highly united in belief that what was happening to the Jews of Germany was incorrect. It was morally wrong. It was repugnant. It should end. But then when we polled about were Americans supportive of allowing Jewish refugees into the United States, Americans by and large were united against that. And that's one of the very many kind of flagship, I think, examples of when public opinion related to foreign policy can be contradictory in nature. That just because Americans, for example, have empathy for a certain group or feel like what a leader is doing to their own population is incorrect, it doesn't always translate into tangible support for American domestic or foreign policy, either around involvement, enhanced military intervention, allowing for refugees, allowing for enhanced immigration. Those two things, you would think that there'd be this sort of linear line, and that there's not a linear line. I do think, though, in terms of foreign policy, when you know that, when you know the history, then you can look at a statistic like the fact that 66% of Americans do support continued assistance to the Ukrainians without a timeline until the Ukrainians succeed in defending their country, to know, well, that's actually quite remarkable, because that's not always the case.
Right. And so how do you then connect the two? How do you then say, well, as you said earlier, some leaders will take this data and say they'll be emboldened by it.
Right.
Others will say, well, that's the data and that's the public sentiment, but that's not the right answer.
It's a great question, and it's a tough one. And in my opinion, I think the acknowledgement of public opinion is crucial.
Mhm.
There are leaders who ignore it, and there are leaders like FDR, Churchill, some of the statesmen of history who at least say, I know this decision is not popular, but I'm here to provide the leadership and moral courage to explain why it's just and it's in our national interest. And I'm going to keep a close eye to see if popular sentiment changes. And I think for those best leaders who make the right decisions and can articulate why that's the case, it often does change. And that's pretty powerful.
Ilana Ron Levey, Managing Director, Public Sector at Gallup. You know, I for our global audience, for those of you that know Gallup, I hope today's interview provided deeper insights into the just profound impact and breadth and depth of what you're doing at Gallup highlights and how it can affect just about anything.
Yeah.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much. An honor. Thank you.
Our privilege. Thank you.